Welcome our remote worshipers, and thank you for joining us this morning as we get into the Word. We continue in our sermon series entitled The Inner Journey. Yes. Okay. Just checking to see if you're with me here. I want to thank Dale for starting us out last week with a view into the inner journey as he looked at Job's life as we wrapped up the book of Job. I intended to text you a couple of times this week and say thank you. Busyness got a hold of me. But thank you, Dale, for covering. Some time ago, I was going through a number of biographies and autobiographies of people who have achieved much, at least in this world's eyes. Steve Jobs, Alexander Graham Bell, Henry Ford, just some of these big names, just read some biographies. And you know, there's a difference between a biography and an autobiography. In fact, I'm not just talking about the definitions. There's a substantial difference in the content of a biography of someone versus the content of their autobiography. See, the autobiographies usually share with us the person's intent. The person shares life from their point of view, whereas a biography written by someone else may just share the facts of what the person did, not necessarily tying in with their intent. Sometimes a biography will tell us of public perception of the person. Whereas autobiographies tend to kind of glaze over and put the best spin on the person's life story. Well, as we were reading in our one-year Bible this week, we came across Ecclesiastes, and truth be told, it is something of an autobiography. And if you anticipate an autobiography would be glazed over with all the nicest things, you might be disappointed when you read Ecclesiastes because it has a completely wrong tone to it, doesn't it? Of all the books in the Bible, it's possibly the most depressing. Possibly. You have to wonder about the state of mind of the writer. We know he was the richest, the most successful king in Israel, if you want to count success in material ways. It was Solomon the wise man. And what does his autobiography read? Ecclesiastes 1:2. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Did you not get my slides? You did not. Can you double check? They were sent. Just double check if you'd be so kind. But yes, vanities of vanities, all is vanity. That's somewhat the summary of the book. Solomon, in his writing, informs us that life is meaningless apart from God. In chapter 1, verse 12, he points out that wisdom is vanity. He says, I set my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is grasping for the wind. For in much wisdom is much grief. And he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. So much for enjoying being the wise one. He says, pleasure is vanity. According to chapter 2, 10 and 11, whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my reward from all my labor. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had done, and on all the labor in which I had toiled, and indeed all was vanity and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. Pleasure was vanity. He points out that even living wisely is vanity. Chapter 2, go to verse 13. Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. This wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceived that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For the wise, as the fool, there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me. For all is vanity and the striving after the wind. He goes on, even work is vanity. Wealth is vanity. Chapter 6, verse 7. All the labor of man is for his mouth, and yet the soul is not satisfied. How many of us overinvest in work and will likely discover, like Solomon did, that wealth is vanity? He goes as far to say, even righteousness is vanity. Take a look at chapter 7, beginning at verse 15. I've seen everything in my days of vanity. There is a just man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs life in his wickedness. Do not be overly righteous, nor be overly wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Do not be overly wicked, nor be foolish. Why should you die before your time? If you listen to Solomon long enough, you just want to throw your hands up. Life isn't worth living. All is vanity. You start agreeing with him. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. And what does he mean when he says vanity? Well, in the original language, the word implies vapor. The word implies a breath. I've heard some preachers suggest something akin to soap bubbles. You try to grasp it, but it's not there. It's gone as soon as you touch it. My friend, if we can learn from someone who has had it all this world has to give us is not enough to satisfy us. Without God at the center of our lives, life is meaningless. And Solomon should know. He had more than most of us will ever have, hopefully more wives than any of us would ever have. And yet, he could not be satisfied. And we ask ourselves, why should we care about Solomon's view of life? Well, the reality is this. Someday, all we've strived for will be in the past. There will come a day that everything we have strived for, everything we have dreamed about, everything we have pursued, everything we have worked for, everything we have accumulated, someday all of that will be in the past. Then what? Then what will our lives be like? Then what will we say? My friends, see, if we die young, suddenly others will ask of our lives, then what? If we attain old age, then at some point we will ask of our lives, now what? As we approach our end, will we look back at life and say, like Solomon, vanities of vanities, all is vanities? You know, life seems great when our best days are ahead of us. But at some point in life, we look in the rearview mirror, and those are the great days. Then what do we say of life? Some of you may remember the 1980s hit by John Cougar Mellencamp, where he warned us that life goes on after the thrill of living is gone. Well, I suppose for some of us, some of the thrill of living has gone. Maybe it's going, maybe for others it's almost all gone. If your life ended today, will you have been satisfied? If an angel came to you and told you you have 1 hour left, your hourglass has 1 hour left, what would you do in that hour? How would you spend it? Would you beg for more time like Hezekiah did, or would you celebrate the time you already had? Would you argue the injustice of God, or would you praise God in your final hour? Would you regret what you didn't do, or would you be thankful for the things you have done? Bonnie Ware was, or maybe still is, a palliative care nurse, and she wrote an interesting book. The title is The 5 Most Common Regrets of the Dying. It's maybe worth reading. What do you think the 5 most common regrets of the dying are? Let me just hear from you. What do you think the 5 most common regrets of the dying may be? Not making amends. I'm sorry? Not praising the Lord. Okay, enough. Not telling folk that you love them. Okay. Not getting your affairs in order. Not seeing the world. Not enjoying your life. Too much time at work. Somebody said something about living in fear. Okay? You will pick up some of those themes in her top 5. Fear number 5. We'll do it David Letterman style backwards. Fear number 5. Regrets, the 5 regrets. I wish that I had let myself be happier. Those are the regrets, not fears. I'm sorry, regrets. Many patients realize in their final days that happiness is a choice. It is not what happens to us, it's what we decide to do with it. Happiness is a choice. They spent their lives stuck in old patterns of fears and preventing them from embracing joy and allowing themselves to be happy. She notes that people often settle for comfortable familiarity and fear of change, denying themselves the happiness they deserve. So, regret number 5. Wish I'd let myself be happier. Number 4. I wish, they say, I had stayed in touch with my friends. You know, as we age, we tend to lose friends. You live long enough, well, you go to all your friends' funerals, right? That's the prize you get for being the longest liver, right? Live long enough, you get to go to all your friends' funerals. What does that mean? As we age, we actually need to make new friends. We need to make more friends as we age. Why? Well, our long-term friends are going to expire on us if we don't go first. I mean, that's reality, right? Can we look at it mathematically, not get super sentimental? Okay? We're going to need to make new friends because we don't know who's going to go first. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends is what people discover. When they realize that they let lifelong relationships wane and disappear. Number 3, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. So many people live with this fear and avoidance of conflict and this desire to keep peace that they hold back on sharing their feelings and live lives of resentment and bitterness. On their deathbeds, they regret not being more honest, which would have allowed for deeper and more meaningful relationships. Number 2, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Yeah. I don't know of anyone, I've never heard of anyone who on their deathbed said, I wish I could have worked 60 more hours. I haven't heard of that. If you have, let me know, okay? I haven't heard, I wish I could have worked 5 more years. I don't think anybody says that. This regret is shared, she says, by almost every male. By almost every male patient. And many women, by the way, but almost every male patient. Wish I hadn't worked so hard. Let's see, if I were to die this afternoon, I might have to say I wish I hadn't worked so much. Number 1, might be a surprise. Now, by the way, she's not writing from a religious perspective, so the regret of not praising God is not included. But number 1, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. She's summarizing, but having worked with dying people for many years, these are her observations. I'm not sure we would call this empirical data, but it's definitely anecdotal, and it definitely gives us something to think about. By the way, if you want a good conversation in your small group, discuss these 5 regrets of dying people. And talk about where you are on that. What would you regret if you had 1 hour left to live? What would you do? Another author, I think, gives us a healthy suggestion, and that's Stephen Covey. How many of you have read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? All right. And I tend to think it's habit number 1, but it's actually not habit number 1. It's habit number 2. Does anybody remember what habit number 2 is? Which one sticks with you most of the 7 habits? Because I know nobody walks around having memorized all 7 habits, but which ones do you remember, those of you that read the book? That's habit number 2. Yes, start with the end in mind. My friends, as we engage life, we need to be mindful of the end. It sounds morbid, right? Always thinking of dying. Maybe the boy went to too many funerals. Yes, he did. He definitely did. But we need to be mindful that it's inevitable. And we need to live with the end in mind. The end comes. What do you want it to be? Another, I don't know if he wrote it, but he sang it. Tim McGraw. Some of y'all know his music. I know 1, maybe 2 of his songs. Maybe someone would have to remind me others. But you know the song he sang. How many of you know the song, Live Like You Were Dying? Let me see your hands. Come on, tell the truth. Look at that. Like 3/4 of you. Yeah. There you go. We are in Montana. For those of you who haven't heard the song or don't remember hearing the song, it's a ballad. It's a story of a gentleman who goes and sees the doctor, and the doctor is concerned about the x-rays, and he essentially is told he's going to die. We presume it's cancer. That's not going to happen. But he is told he's going to die, and he's asked, what did you do? And the main character says, I went skydiving, I went Rocky Mountain climbing, I did 2.7 seconds on a bull named Fu Manchu. And I love deeper, and what's the next line? You probably know it more than I do. The whole point is the man lived intentionally until his very last. My friends, how are we living? Are we living accumulating regrets? Are we living just trying to get by? Are we living covering up our true feelings? Or are we living with purpose? Are we living meaningful lives? As we look at Solomon, we would think that's one person that should have had it all together with all his wisdom, and yet when he came to the end of his life, all he could say was vanity of vanities, all is vanity. So our question today, our challenge today is, how can we live beyond the vanity of striving? How can we live beyond the vanity of just doing the same thing over and over again? How can we get to the end of our lives and have something different to say than Solomon? Well, if you read the entire book, which if you were following in your one-year Bible, you did, you get to chapter 12. And in chapter 12, he says this, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter." Yes, Solomon, let us hear the conclusion. What does he say? "Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all." Fear God, keep his commandments. Now, you think about that, fear God, and I don't know about you, I do not enjoy the idea of living in fear. I know people that live in perpetual fear. That's not the life I want. But Solomon isn't saying live in fear, he's saying fear God, and that's a very Hebrew term that says be mindful of God, reverence God, hold God in high esteem. It does not mean run around afraid of God. Now, some Christians actually believe it means be afraid of God, and it's like they live this terrified life. God is going to do something bad to me if I sin. No, that's not what it's supposed to mean. It means be mindful of God. As the psalmist, and we don't know which psalmist it was because it wasn't given credit, but you look at Psalms 119, yes, that very long psalm, and verse 133 says, "Direct my steps by your word, and let no iniquity have dominion over me." But he's saying, God, direct my life. Fear God. Live mindful of God. Live with a mindset that God is. Some people want to dismiss that God is. We need to live with the mindset that God is, and God has a plan, and God has values. Live life in the presence and in the context of God. Fear God. Be mindful of God. Number 2, what do you say? Fear God and keep his commandments. Now, Adventists hear commandments, and immediately we go to the 10 Commandments. That's not what he's talking about. When the Old Testament references the 10 Commandments, more often than not, what you're going to find are the words the covenant. All right? There is one time Jesus references the commandments, and he's talking about the 10 Commandments, and that's when he tells the rich young ruler, keep the commandments. However, commandments does not mean the Decalogue. It basically means the teachings that you're given. The commandments of God, the teachings of God. So Solomon is saying, fear God and keep God's teachings. All of God's teachings. Why? Because God's laws tell us what matters to God. What matters to God. They are expressions of his values. Would you like to understand how God feels about something? Well, look into his law. What is written down is God's value of things. Why is life so precious? God says a life for a life, right? Because God values life. Every commandment, every instruction in the Bible from God tells us what is important to God. So I would say if you want to apply that to your life, live according to God's values. Live according to God's values. So what does he say? Let us hear the conclusion. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is man's all. This is man's all. Is it really? That's it? This is our purpose? To fear God and be obedient? Or to be mindful of God and embrace his values? Is that all there is? What Solomon and others are telling us is that meaning is found in the journey with God and not in the accomplishments of our goals. In other words, trust God's process. Meaning is found in the journey with God. we are not going to make the full journey with God on this side of the resurrection. We are not going to make the full journey with God on this side of eternity. But our meaning is found in our journey with God. It is not on reaching the destination. As Moses was preparing for his exit, he rehearsed the law with the children of Israel before they went into the promised land. And in Deuteronomy 4, we see some counsel that Moses gives the people. Deuteronomy 4, verses 5 and 6. The text tells me, Moses speaking here, "Surely I have taught you statutes and judgment, just as Yahweh my God commanded me, that you should act according to them in the land which you go to possess. Therefore, be careful to observe them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples, who will hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people." You're saying, what does that have to do with anything we're talking about? Well, life is meaningful in God. As we walk in God, as we practice in God, as we do what God has instructed us to, we discover the meaning of our lives. See, a lot of us want to sit down and figure out the meaning and then maybe go out and live from it. God is saying, do as I've instructed you. Order your life according to my instructions, and as you journey with me, you will discover the meaning for life. When we live in accordance to God's design, we discover layers of meaning we would miss if we were only chasing goals. In fact, many, like Solomon, who pursue prosperity, who pursue accomplishment, who pursue greatness, who pursue wisdom, many miss the whole point of their existence because they were too busy pursuing rather than journeying with God. So, my friends, when we put God's principles into practice, we find wisdom and meaning in our lives. Well, we started by saying life is meaningless apart from God. So why not conclude by saying life is meaningful with God? That said, why don't we find our meaning in God? Why don't we find our joy in God? Why don't we find our fulfillment in God? Why don't we find our thrill in God? Let us find our accomplishment in God. Let's find our success in God. Our strength is in God. Let's find our resilience in God. Find our hope in God and our peace in God. For our comfort is in God and our rest is in God. Our eternity is with God. So let's find our meaning in God.